Welcome to the latest edition of Russia Unmasked from the Centre for Russian Studies in Kyiv. In this session, we challenge the propaganda published by the Kremlin against Ukraine and share Ukrainian perspectives. My name is Tony Meehan. I'm based in London. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues, more than 1,400 days. Before we start, as usual, a prayer for Ukraine. Long may she survive, endure and prevail and succeed. As you know, regular listeners, viewers to our podcast will know our main objective is to respond to Russian propaganda against Ukraine. On more than one occasion, we have acknowledged the mastery of Vladimir Putin and his art of propaganda. In this episode, we acknowledge and salute another art form, that of hyperbole, and the skill of the United States President. For those of you that are wondering what is the difference between hyperbole and propaganda, in truth, there is very little. Propaganda is using biased or misleading information deliberately to spread influence and public opinion, beliefs and actions to support specific political cause, an agenda, a product, often by appealing to emotions as opposed to logic. Hyperbole is a way of speaking or writing that makes someone or something sound bigger, better, more important, valuable, wealthier, powerful than they really are. You may recall in the last episode we covered the end of the START nuclear protection agreement between the United States and Russia. In this episode of Russia Unmasked, we start with an American nuclear story in response to Russia's statements which feature Ukraine. US President Trump on Truth Social said he had prevented several nuclear wars around the world, including a nuclear war between Ukraine and Russia. He went on to say that the United States is the most powerful country in the world and that he fully rebuilt the US military used during his first term, including new and many refurbished nuclear weapons. He also added Space Force, and you may recall that we spoke about the potential for nuclear weapons circulating in space around the world and satellites and what have you. And now he continues to build the military at levels never seen before. That's the US military. And he's saying that we are adding battleships which are 100 times more powerful than the ones that roamed the seas during World War II. That is an expectation, not a surprise. The US president also wrote that he had prevented nuclear wars around the world between Pakistan and India, Iran and Israel, as well as Russia and Ukraine. As Ukraine is not a nuclear state, if Russia attacked Ukraine with nuclear weapons, it would be a war of mass destruction and not a nuclear war per se. Unfortunately, he is yet to realize that Russia attacks nuclear power stations. They could have a major negative impact on Europe, not merely Ukraine. Because if they create a nuclear accident or a nuclear incident, and how many of us remember Chernobyl of 40 years ago in April 1986? That was a moment, wasn't it? Last November, he said that the United States has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, enough to blow up the world 150 times. I think we can call that hyperbole. In October, he instructed the Pentagon to immediately resume nuclear weapons testing. We could call this hyper-Trumpaganda, or propaganda, or whatever. Hyper-Trumpaganda, I think so, yes. The next story, this session, came as a surprise to me because I thought the Russian Secret Service, the FSB, had their eyes and ears everywhere across Russia, from street corners, coffee shops, bars, phones and internet. But according to the United Kingdom's Defence Intelligence Agency, the FSB has just been granted control over communication services in Russia. So basically, they have reviewed Russia's plans to grant the Federal Security Service, FSB, broad powers over the country's communication networks. So this means internet, telephones, broadband, etc., etc. So it's voice, text, images, data transmitted by radio, fiber optic, or other electromagnetic systems. The amendments would give the FSB, I should say, unprecedented reach across the entire communications landscape. UK Defence Intelligence pointed out that on the 27th of January, the State Department, that's the lower chamber of the Duma of Russia's parliament, the State Duma, which is the lower chamber of Russia's parliament, approved the government-backed amendments that would allow the FSB to shut down mobile internet, fixed-line internet, telephone services, or any other means of communication. I mean, forgive me if I'm being cynical and surprised and whatever, but my understanding was that the FSB did that anyway, with or without authority of the Duma, of the Parliament. So we wonder now if they're going to be writing, this is the FSB, if they were going to be hiring propaganda writers or more hackers, and if the levels of Russian hyper-propaganda proves to be a success. I don't know. We'll see. Our regular propaganda contributor, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, this week opened his mouth and put his foot in it, sadly, once again. He said that Ukraine is an enemy of his country. Why? They are next door neighbours. He was speaking at an anti-war protest reported by European Pravda, in which he claimed that Ukraine is constantly pressuring Brussels to cut Hungary off from cheap Russian energy, which he said would push up the utility prices for Hungarian families, consumers alike. Anyone who said such a thing is an enemy of Hungary, so Ukraine is our enemy. Just because they complained that he's getting cheap Russian oil that is funding Russia's war against Ukraine makes them an enemy. He conveniently forgets that Russia invaded Ukraine 4 years ago. EU membership Hungary, NATO membership Hungary, both are supporting the defence of Ukraine except Hungary in its fight against Russia. It is the EU that is blocking Russian oil, not Ukraine. Having accused Ukraine of being the enemy of Hungary, Orbán then said that while Ukraine's proximity to Hungary means cooperation is necessary, Ukraine should not be allowed to join the EU. So, with one hand, he's saying, as a neighbour, it's important that we cooperate, but as you're at war and you're making life difficult for us with our oil prices, you shouldn't be allowed to join the EU. Orbán is the enemy of Ukraine and the ally of Russia. Think about that. I wonder if the Hungarians understand this or simply accept Orbán's mix of hyperbole and propaganda. More hyper-Orbaganda, whatever. Let me leave you with an historical Russian military statistic and a current Ukrainian military fact, not propaganda or hyperbole. In World War II, at the Battle of Stalingrad, it is estimated that Russian military losses were 1.1 million dead, plus civilian casualties, estimated between 45,000 and 235,000. So you can work the figures out for yourself. And that was sort of during the period of July 1942 to February 1943. In the past 4 years, Russian military losses in Ukraine are estimated at approaching 1.3 million, virtually the same. Russia has captured less than 20% of the Ukrainian countryside, i.e. the Donbass. Our next story is neither hyperbole or propaganda, it is called stupidity. The Ukrainian embassy in Russia, which has been closed since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, has been ordered to pay over 5.5 million rubles, approximately $71,000 US, outstanding for electricity by a court in Moscow. So you've invaded and abused your neighbouring country. They've closed their embassy because of that. And you are now giving them 4 years on not only a bill for electricity that is not theirs to use, and at the same time fine them and give them and penalise them. Let me fill you into the background of this. The Moscow Arbitration Court ordered more than 5.5 million rubles be recovered from the Ukrainian embassy in Russia further to a claim by Moscow United Electric Grid Company of an unpaid energy bill. With regards to one of the claims, the court ruled that 3.4 million rubles of outstanding debt and 179,000 rubles penalty, a penalty occurring from April 17th, 2024 until the date of the actual payment, and the ruble, etc., should be recovered from the Embassy of Ukraine in the Russian Federation, Moscow, in Leonetsky Lane, in favour of the public joint stock company, Moscow United Electric. I would send that bill to, there's a gentleman that lives in Moscow. Well, he lives in different places each night, I think. He's, what's his name? Putin. Yes, that's it. Yes, I would send it to Mr. Putin, or maybe President Putin. He might reopen it. In addition, the court granted claims brought by the energy company totaling more than 2 million rubles. That's $26,000, including fines and penalties for late payment charges. I think stupidity is appropriate. That's all for now. So from all of us here at the Centre of Russian Studies in Kyiv, thank you. Please share this podcast with your friends and those who you think will be interested. The online address is Russia Unmasked. We'll be back soon with more news from Kyiv. Until then, Slav Ukraine. Ukrainians were, are, and always will be here. Volodymyr Zelensky. Goodbye.